Caitlyn Armstrong is an American woman who was convicted of the murder of professional cyclist Anna Mariah on May 11, 2022. The case gained significant media attention due to its love triangle aspect and Armstrong's attempt to evade capture. Armstrong was in an on-again, off-again relationship with professional cyclist Colin Strickland. During a brief separation from Armstrong in late 2021, Strickland had a short romantic relationship with Mo Wilson, a rising star in the cycling world. On May 11, 2022, Mo Wilson was found fatally shot at a friend's home in Austin, Texas, where she was staying for an upcoming race. Police quickly focused on Caitlyn Armstrong after surveillance video showed her black Jeep Grand Cherokee arriving at the residence moments before the shooting, leading to allegations that Armstrong was motivated by jealousy. After being questioned by police and then released due to a mix-up with a prior misdemeanor warrant, Armstrong sold her Jeep and fled the country, using her sister's passport to fly to Costa Rica. There, she attempted to change her appearance through plastic surgery and assumed fake identities while teaching yoga. U.S. Marshals launched an international manhunt, eventually locating her in Costa Rica by placing a fake ad on Facebook for a yoga instructor. Armstrong was apprehended on June 29, 2022, after 43 days at large and extradited back to the U.S. Caitlyn Armstrong pleaded not guilty to the murder charge. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence including DNA found on Wilson's bicycle, cell phone data, and the Uconnect navigation system from Armstrong's vehicle, all of which placed her near the crime scene. There was also testimony that Armstrong had expressed a desire to kill Wilson. On November 16, 2023, after a 2-week trial, Caitlyn Armstrong was found guilty of first-degree murder. The following day, she was sentenced to 90 years in prison for Wilson's murder, with eligibility for parole after 30 years. She is currently imprisoned at the Dr. Lane Murray Unit, a women's prison in Gatesville, Texas. Armstrong has since filed an appeal of her conviction, which has been denied by a court of appeals, and the parents of Mo Wilson have also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against her. Additionally, in October 2023, Armstrong attempted to escape custody while being escorted to a medical appointment, leading to a brief chase before she was reapprehended. The escape charge was later dropped. Susan Lucille Wright is a Texas woman who gained significant national attention for the 2003 murder of her husband, Jeffrey "Jeff" Andrew Wright. The case, often sensationalized as the Blue-Eyed Butcher due to her appearance and the brutal nature of the crime, became a focal point for discussions on domestic abuse and self-defense. On January 13, 2003, in their Houston home in unincorporated Harris County, Susan Wright, then 26, fatally stabbed her 34-year-old husband, Jeff Wright, an astonishing 193 times with 2 different knives. After the stabbing, she dragged his body to their backyard and buried it in a hole that Jeff had previously dug for a home improvement project. To conceal the crime, she attempted to clean the blood-spattered bedroom, even painting over some areas. The day after the murder, she filed a false domestic abuse report and sought a restraining order against her husband to explain his disappearance. 5 days after the murder, on January 18th, Susan Wright confessed to her attorney, Neil Davis, who then notified the authorities. Jeff Wright's body was discovered buried in the backyard, partially exposed, after the family dog reportedly dug it up. Susan Wright's murder trial began in February 2004 and was nationally televised on Court TV. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Kelly Siegler, depicted Wright as a cold and calculating killer who seducted her husband, tied him to the bed as part of a sexual game, and then brutally murdered him to collect a $200,000 life insurance policy. Siegler notably brought the actual bed from the crime scene into the courtroom and, using a co-counsel, reenacted her theory of how the murder occurred, including how Wright could have tied him up and inflicted the numerous stab wounds. The defense, led by attorney Neil Davis, argued that Susan Wright was a victim of years of severe physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband, who they claimed was violent and a drug user. Wright testified in her own defense, stating that on the night of the murder, Jeff was on a cocaine binge, had beaten her, forcibly essayed her, and threatened her with a knife. She claimed she struggled with him, got the knife, and then, in a panic state, stabbed him repeatedly, fearing he would kill her if she stopped. She testified she couldn't stop stabbing him and aimed for his pubic region for all the times that he essayed her. On March 3, 2004, after over 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Susan Wright of murder. She was initially sentenced to 25 years in prison. Her conviction was upheld on appeal in 2005. However, in 2009, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted her a new sentencing hearing, ruling that her original trial attorneys provided ineffective assistance of counsel during the punishment phase. This was partly due to their failure to present additional evidence of Jeff Wright's alleged abusive behavior from a former fiancé. In November 2010, her sentence was reduced to 20 years in prison. Susan Wright was denied parole in 2014 and 2017. However, she was granted parole in July 2020 and was released from prison on December 30th, 2020, after serving over 16 years of her sentence. She is currently on parole. Ana Lilia Trujillo is a Houston, Texas woman who was convicted of the 2013 murder of her boyfriend, Alf Stephen Anderson, a University of Houston professor and researcher. The case gained significant notoriety due to the unusual weapon used, a stiletto high-heel shoe. On June 9, 2013, Houston police responded to a 911 call at Alf Stephen Anderson's luxury high-rise condominium. Upon arrival, Ana Lilia Trujillo, then 44 years old, answered the door, covered in blood, and led officers to Anderson's body. The 59-year-old professor was found dead in a hallway with an astonishing number of puncture wounds, primarily to his head, face, and neck. Forensic examination later revealed he had been stabbed at least 25 times with the 5.5-inch heel of Trujillo's blue suede stiletto shoe. The depth of some head wounds was noted to be up to 1.5 inches. Trujillo and Anderson had been in an on-again, off-again relationship. On the night of the murder, they had been out drinking tequila at a nightclub before returning to Anderson's apartment. Trujillo claimed that an argument ensued and Anderson became abusive, physically attacking her and attempting to choke her. She stated she acted in self-defense, grabbing the nearest object, which happened to be her shoe, and striking him to protect herself. However, prosecutors painted a different picture. They argued that Trujillo was hot-tempered and aggressive, even when not provoked. A cab driver who drove the couple home testified that Trujillo was belligerent during the ride, while Anderson was embarrassed by her behavior. Prosecutors also highlighted that Trujillo had no significant injuries from the alleged struggle, while Anderson had defensive wounds on his hands and wrists. They also presented evidence that Trujillo had previously joked about stabbing someone with a stiletto heel if they messed with her. Ana Lilia Trujillo's murder trial began in March 2014 in Harris County, Texas. Her defense attorney argued that she was a victim of domestic violence and acted out of genuine fear for her life. The prosecution, however, maintained that Trujillo attacked Anderson in a rage, pinned him down after he fell, and then repeatedly struck him with the shoe. They emphasized the sheer number of blows and the brutal nature of the injuries as evidence against a self-defense claim. On April 1st, 2014, after a relatively short deliberation, the jury found Ana Lilia Trujillo guilty of murder. During the punishment phase, prosecutors asked for a life sentence, arguing that Trujillo not only brutally killed Anderson, but also tried to tarnish his character by falsely claiming abuse. On April 11, 2014, Ana Lilia Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison. Her legal team filed appeals, but her conviction and sentence have been upheld by Texas appellate courts. As of the current date, July 2025, Ana Lilia Trujillo is incarcerated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. She is serving her life sentence at the Christina Melton Crane Unit, formerly the Mountain View Unit, in Gatesville, Texas. Her parole eligibility date is April 11th, 2044. Wendy May Davidson is a Texas veterinarian who was convicted of the murder of her husband, Air Force Staff Sergeant Michael Severance, in 2006. The case began in January 2005 when Davidson reported her husband missing, suggesting he might have deserted his military post. However, investigators from both the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and local police became suspicious due to inconsistencies in her story and her unusual behavior. The investigation intensified, and a tracking device was placed on Davidson's vehicle, which revealed her movements, including visits to a ranch owned by a family friend. In March 2005, Davidson was arrested after her brother informed investigators that she had claimed to have found Severance dead and, fearing a family member had killed him, had dumped his body in a stock tank. Severance's body was subsequently recovered from the pond, found to have been stabbed 41 times, poisoned with euthanasia drugs, and weighted down with over 140 pounds of items, including a boat anchor. A search of Davidson's veterinary clinic also uncovered suspicious records. Davidson was indicted for murder and 2 counts of tampering with evidence. She pleaded no contest to all charges. As part of a plea agreement, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murder charge and 10 years on each of the evidence tampering charges, with all sentences to run concurrently. Davidson appealed her conviction, arguing that the evidence obtained from the tracking device on her vehicle should have been suppressed, citing Fourth Amendment violations and the Posse Comitatus Act regarding military involvement in civilian law enforcement. However, both the trial court and the appeals court denied her motion, upholding her conviction. As of the current information, Wendy May Davidson remains incarcerated in a Texas prison. Her maximum sentence date is October 15th, 2031, and her parole eligibility date was April 15th, 2019. Her parole has been denied multiple times, with the most recent denial on May 30th, 2024, citing the nature of offense. She is scheduled for her next parole review in May 2027. Amber Guyger is a former Dallas police officer who was convicted of murder in 2019 for the fatal shooting of her neighbor, Botham Jean, in September 2018. On September 6, 2018, Guyger, who was off duty but still in uniform after a long shift, mistakenly entered Botham Jean's apartment, which was directly above hers in their Dallas apartment complex. Believing she was in her own apartment and that Jean was an intruder, she shot and killed him. Jean, a 26-year-old accountant, was reportedly eating ice cream on his couch at the time. Guyger was initially charged with manslaughter, but a grand jury later indicted her on a murder charge. The case garnered national attention, sparking protests and discussions about racial bias in policing, as Jean was an unarmed black man killed in his own home by a white officer. During her criminal trial, Guyger testified that she believed her life was in danger. However, prosecutors presented evidence, including text messages with offensive and discriminatory content, that aimed to challenge her credibility and motive. On October 1st, 2019, a jury found Amber Guyger guilty of murder. She was subsequently sentenced to 10 years in prison. Guyger appealed her conviction, but the Fifth Court of Appeals of Texas upheld the murder conviction in August 2021. The U.S. Supreme Court later denied her final appeal in November 2022. In a separate civil wrongful death lawsuit filed by Jean's family, a jury in November 2024 ordered Guyger to pay nearly $100 million in damages, $98.65 million. Guyger did not appear at the civil trial, representing herself initially before a pro bono attorney was appointed. Amber Guyger is currently serving her 10-year sentence at the Patrick O'Daniel Unit, a state prison in Gatesville, Texas. She became eligible for parole in September 2024, but was denied parole in October 2024. Her next parole hearing is scheduled for October 2026. Her projected release date, if parole is not granted, is September 29, 2029. Diane Zamora is a former United States Naval Academy midshipman who was convicted of the 1995 murder of Adrienne Jessica Jones in Texas, a case that garnered significant national attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and the fact that it involved two highly promising military academy cadets. Zamora and her high school sweetheart, David Graham, were engaged and both had appointments to prestigious military academies when Graham confessed to Zamora that he had a one-time sexual encounter with 16-year-old Adrienne Jones. According to Graham's later confession, an enraged Zamora demanded Jones's death to prove his love. On December 4th, 1995, Graham lured Jones to a secluded spot near Joe Pool Lake in Grand Prairie, Texas, where Zamora, hidden in the back seat, emerged to confront Jones. The attack escalated with Zamora striking Jones with a barbell weight and then ordering Graham to shoot her, resulting in Jones's death by a gunshot to the head. The murder remained unsolved for months until Diane Zamora, then a freshman at the U.S. Naval Academy, began boasting about the crime to her roommates, claiming her boyfriend had killed for her. Her roommates reported the confession, leading to the arrest of both Zamora and Graham on September 6, 1996. Their arrests, involving two military academy cadets, created a media sensation. Both gave similar accounts to police, but attempted to shift blame during their separate trials. David Graham was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Diane Zamora, despite denying ordering the killing, was convicted of capital murder in February 1998, based on her confessions and testimony, and was also sentenced to life in prison. Under Texas law at the time, her life sentence for capital murder means she will be eligible for parole after a minimum of 40 years, with her parole eligibility date set for September 5, 2036. Diane Zamora is currently incarcerated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice System, housed at the Dr. Lane Murray Unit. Her various appeals, including a civil rights lawsuit, have been rejected. The case of Elizabeth Denise Escalona, who was sentenced to 99 years in prison in 2012 for the severe abuse of her 2-year-old daughter, Jocelyn Cedillo, gained national attention due to the horrific nature of the crime. Jocelyn's injuries were extensive, including brain bleeding, widespread bruising across her body, abrasions, a laceration inside her mouth, patches of missing hair, bite marks, and a previously broken and healing rib, consistent with ongoing abuse. Critically, her hands were glued to a wall with super glue, with both glue and paint residue found on her skin. Doctors testified that the child's injuries were indicative of torture and that she would have died without medical intervention. Although she miraculously recovered from a coma within 2 days and was released from the hospital shortly thereafter, subsequently placed in the care of her grandmother along with Escalona's 4 other children. During her sentencing hearing, Escalona admitted to the abuse, expressing remorse and attempting to explain her actions by detailing a troubled past that included a chaotic childhood, claims of abuse, an abusive relationship with Jocelyn's father, and significant financial stress. While her defense argued for leniency, citing her own difficult life circumstances and a history of drug abuse, prosecutors painted Escalona as a dangerous and unfit mother with a history of violence and gang involvement. They highlighted her refusal to fully accept responsibility and ultimately requested a life sentence, asserting that her children would be better off without her. State District Judge Larry Mitchell delivered the severe 99-year sentence, emphasizing the savagely beat Angie of her child, a decision that shocked many, but was upheld on appeal despite claims of ineffective assistance of counsel. Escalona's parole eligibility date is April 29, 2042, meaning she must serve at least 30 years before being considered for release by the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. Carla Fay Tucker was an American woman who gained significant national and international attention for her capital murder conviction and subsequent execution in Texas. She was the first woman to be executed in Texas since 1863 and only the second woman executed in the United States since the reinstatement of capital punishment in 1976. Her case became a focal point in the death penalty debate due to her gender and, notably, her widely publicized conversion to Christianity while on death row. The brutal crime for which she was convicted occurred on June 13, 1983, in Houston, Texas. Tucker, then 23, along with her boyfriend Daniel Ryan Garrett and another man, James Leibrandt, broke into the apartment of Jerry Lynn Dean. Tucker and Garrett, under the influence of drugs, brutally murdered Dean and his companion, Deborah Thornton, using a pickaxe and other objects. The crime was particularly gruesome. Tucker later testified that she experienced gratification with each blow of the pickaxe. Following her arrest 5 weeks later, Tucker was convicted of capital murder in 1984 and sentenced to death. While on death row at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, she underwent a profound religious conversion to Christianity, which she maintained transformed her life. This conversion attracted an unusually large movement advocating for the commutation of her sentence to life without parole. Supporters included various religious figures, some human rights organizations, and even some foreign government officials. She married her prison minister, Reverend Dana Lane Brown, by proxy in 1995. Despite her expressions of remorse, her claims of rehabilitation, and the extensive appeals and pleas for clemency from various groups and individuals, including evangelist Pat Robertson, then Texas Governor George W. Bush refused to commute her sentence. Carla Fay Tucker was executed by lethal injection on February 3, 1998, at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. She was pronounced dead at 6:45 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 minutes after receiving the injection. Her execution generated immense media coverage and sparked widespread discussion about the death penalty, mercy, and redemption. Brittany Halberg is an American woman who was convicted of the 1996 capital murder of 80-year-old A.B. Towery Sr. in Amarillo, Texas. The case gained notoriety for the brutal nature of the crime, and more recently, for the overturning of her conviction in March 2025 after she spent 27 years on death row. On November 13, 1996, Halberg, then 23, was involved in a violent altercation with Towery in his southwest Amarillo home. Halberg, a S worker and drug addict, claimed self-defense, testifying that Towery attacked her with a frying pan after discovering her smoking drugs in his apartment. She stated she struggled with him, and after he pulled out strands of her hair, she lost it and stabbed him multiple times before shoving a brass lamp pole down his throat. Prosecutors, however, argued that Halberg killed Towery in order to rob him of money and prescription drugs, which would elevate the charge to capital murder. Evidence presented included Towery's open wallet and witness testimony seeing Halberg counting money afterward. Halberg fled to Tennessee but was arrested in Memphis in February 1997 and extradited back to Texas. In March 1998, she was found guilty of capital murder in the course of committing a robbery and sentenced to death. Halberg's conviction was overturned in March 2025 by the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. The court found that the prosecution had committed a Brady violation by failing to disclose that their key witness, Vicky Kirkpatrick, was a paid confidential informant for the Amarillo Police Department. Kirkpatrick, a former jail cellmate of Halberg's, testified that Halberg had confessed to her about murdering Towery for money and had described the killing in gruesome detail, even claiming it was fun and amazing. This testimony was critical to the state's case, particularly in rebutting Halberg's self-defense claim and establishing the robbery motive. The appeals court noted that Kirkpatrick's informant status and the fact that she allegedly received thousands of dollars and had a pending felony burglary charge that was held over her head until after she testified were deliberately withheld from the defense and the jury. Kirkpatrick herself recanted her testimony in 2011, stating she was coerced by prosecutors. The Fifth Circuit ruled that the suppression of this information violated Halberg's due process rights, as it would have significantly undermined Kirkpatrick's credibility and could have led to a different outcome at trial or sentencing. As of July 2025, Brittany Halberg, now 52, remains incarcerated at the Patrick O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas. Her capital murder conviction and death sentence have been vacated. The case has been remanded back to the district court to decide how to proceed. This means the state of Texas could choose to retry her, offer a plea deal, or potentially even drop the charges, though a retrial is considered likely. The state has recently petitioned the U.S. Fifth Circuit for a rehearing en banc, meaning before the full court, of the decision to overturn her conviction, which Halberg's legal team is opposing. The outcome of this petition will further determine the future of her case. Ashley Paige Benton became widely known in Houston, Texas, for her involvement in the 2006 stabbing death of 15-year-old Gabriel Granillo at Irvin Chew Park. The case gained significant local and state attention due to the youth of those involved, the gang-related context, and the unusual legal outcome. On June 6, 2006, Ashley Paige Benton, then 17 years old and associated with a gang known as Crazy Crew, was involved in a large gang fight at Irvin Chew Park in Houston. The fight involved members of her gang and MS-13, a rival gang that Gabriel Granillo was allegedly associated with. During the melee, Benton stabbed Granillo with a double-bladed knife. The 5.5-inch blade punctured Granillo's heart, leading to his death at the park. Benton's defense team claimed she acted in self-defense, stating she felt threatened by someone approaching her during the chaotic fight. However, MS-13 gang members and some witnesses testified that Granillo was turning away from Benton when he was stabbed. Initially, Benton was to be tried as a juvenile, potentially facing up to 40 years in prison. However, prosecutors successfully petitioned to have her tried as an adult, transferring her to adult court where she faced the possibility of probation or 5 years to life in prison for murder. She was allowed to post bail and remain under house arrest after a week in adult jail. Police obtained a confession from Benton at her residence, though her lawyers later argued this confession was illegal as she was questioned without her mother or legal representation present. The trial focused heavily on the conflicting accounts of the stabbing and the gang affiliations of those involved. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury ended in a hung jury, unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Reports varied, but it was generally understood that the jury was split, with some jurors believing she was guilty of murder and others leaning towards a lesser charge or even self-defense. Plea deal and aggravated assault conviction later dismissed. Following the hung jury, prosecutors and Benton's defense team agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for Benton pleading guilty to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, she would receive 5 years of deferred adjudication probation. This type of probation means that if the defendant successfully completes the terms, the conviction is voided and the criminal charge is dismissed. As part of the agreement, Benton was required to perform 300 hours of community service and obtain a high school diploma or GED. If she violated the probation terms, she would face conviction for aggravated assault and potentially up to 20 years in prison. Ashley Paige Benton successfully completed the terms of her probation, which was ended early in 2009. As a result of successfully completing her deferred adjudication, her aggravated assault charge was dismissed. This means she does not have a criminal conviction for the stabbing death of Gabriel Granillo on her record. At the time, her lawyer stated that for her personal safety, she would assume a new name and move due to death threats. Ronda Glover is a Texas woman who was convicted of the 2004 murder of her estranged boyfriend, James Jimmy Jost, an Austin oil man. The case garnered significant attention in Texas due to the dramatic circumstances surrounding the shooting and the complex relationship between Glover and Jost, with whom she shared a son. On July 25, 2004, authorities discovered the body of 49-year-old James Jost in an upstairs hallway of Glover's home in southwest Austin, Texas. He had been shot multiple times and died from the gunshot wounds. Evidence at the crime scene, including bloodstain patterns, suggested that Jost was shot first in the bedroom and then attempted to move through the hallway before collapsing. An autopsy revealed he had been shot at least 10 times. The shell casings found at the scene were determined to have been fired from a Glock 19 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Ronda Glover quickly became a prime suspect. Police discovered that she and Jost had been in an intermittent romantic relationship for about 15 years and had a 9-year-old son together. They were essentially living as if married. After the discovery of Jost's body, Glover and her son could not be located, leading to a nationwide alert. She was eventually found and arrested in a recreational vehicle RV in Ellis County, Kansas, a few days after the murder. A Glock 9mm handgun was found in the RV. During the investigation, it was revealed that Glover had recently taken shooting lessons at gun ranges in Houston, asking about scenarios like shooting someone sitting on her sofa while she was behind the sofa in the kitchen. She also practiced shooting just days before Jost's death and reportedly showed tremendous improvement. Testimony from a friend also indicated that Glover had previously discussed plans to get rid of Jost by seducing him, handcuffing him to the bed, cutting off his genitals, and setting the house on fire. Ronda Glover testified in her own defense, admitting to shooting Jost but claiming it was in self-defense. She alleged that Jost had been physically abusive throughout their relationship, and that on the day of the shooting, he confronted her in her bedroom, choked her, and threatened to kill her, at which point she pulled her gun out and shot him. On cross-examination, when asked if she started pulling the trigger and just never stopped, Glover claimed the gun just went off. It just perpetuated. The jury, however, did not accept her self-defense claim. In February 2006, Ronda Glover was convicted of murder by a Travis County jury. Her punishment was assessed at 46 years imprisonment. Glover appealed her conviction, arguing, among other things, that the trial court erred in refusing to submit an instruction on the lesser included offense of criminally negligent homicide and in admitting certain evidence. However, the Third Court of Appeals of Texas affirmed the judgment in 2006, rejecting her points of error. As of the most recent information, July 2025, Ronda Glover, now 58, is currently incarcerated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. She is housed at the Hilltop Unit in Gatesville, Texas. Her parole eligibility date is August 27th, 2027, and her maximum sentence date is August 27th, 2050. Christine Marie Powella is an American woman who was convicted of the July 18th, 2003, capital murder of 4 people, including 2 of her closest friends, in their home in Clear Lake City, Texas. The crime, often referred to as the Clear Lake murders, remained unsolved for 3 years before a tip led investigators to Powella and her then boyfriend. On July 18, 2003, 4 individuals were brutally murdered in a house in Clear Lake City, a suburb of Houston. The victims were 18-year-old Rachel Colorudis, 18-year-old Tiffany Rowell, both close friends of Powella, 21-year-old Marcus Priscilla, and 22-year-old Adalbert Sanchez. They were all shot multiple times. The scene was particularly gruesome, with Colorudis reportedly still clinging to life and attempting to summon help when Powella allegedly returned to beat her to death with a gun. At the time of the murders, Christine Powella was 17 years old. She had a history of being bullied and was described as an outsider before she was befriended by Colorudis and Rowell, who helped her improve her appearance and social standing. However, Powella reportedly struggled with addiction and had begun a relationship with Christopher Snyder, who was 21 and also involved in drugs. The motive for the murders is believed to have been robbery, possibly related to a drug deal gone wrong, or a malignant envy Powella harbored towards her popular friends. For 3 years, the case remained a baffling cold case for investigators. The breakthrough came in July 2006, when an anonymous tip led police to Powella and Snyder. Powella was arrested in San Antonio, Texas. When questioned, she initially denied active participation, but eventually admitted involvement, attempting to place most of the blame on Snyder. Christopher Snyder, alerted to the warrant for his arrest, took his life before he could be apprehended. Christine Powella was charged with 4 counts of capital murder. During her trial in October 2008, prosecutors presented evidence including her confessions and the brutal details of the crime. The defense argued that her confession was unreliable due to heroin withdrawal during interrogation. However, the jury was not swayed. On October 13, 2008, Powella was convicted of 4 counts of capital murder. Because she was a juvenile, 17 years old, at the time of the killings, she was not eligible for the death penalty under Texas law. The following day, she was sentenced to life in prison. Powella has filed multiple appeals, challenging various aspects of her conviction and sentence, but these have been denied by appellate courts. As of the current information, Christine Marie Powella, now 39 years old, is incarcerated at the Christina Melton Crane unit. Her parole eligibility date is July 22, 2046, when she will be 60 years old. She is currently not in the parole review process.